What we did lock. He used to joke that our apartment was a hotel for paperbacks and boys who forgot their keys. That was before we learned where to put the bowl by the door and what to keep inside it. My name is Ian. The man I loved was Cal, and if there's a more dangerous sentence in English than he's an actor, I haven't met it. He had a way of looking at a room that made the room apologize. I worked in casting for an indie film company that paid in miracles and pretended to pay in money. We survived on tomatoes and late fees, and the belief that a story is something you change by telling. We met at an audition where every man wore the same leather jacket and the same belief that he wasn't like the others. Cal came in with no jacket and said his lines as if he'd overheard them. I made a mark in the margin that meant watch him break someone. He got the part, and then he got me, and then for a while he got good at remembering the weeks by how often we watered the basil on the fire escape. The first intrigue was innocent enough to pass a background check. The director of the next project, Theo, held rehearsals at a loft with the windows arranged like a polite mistake. He had a laugh that felt like a room with better lighting. Cal came home talking about notes in a voice that had learned to be humble. He told me Theo believed in him. I said I did too. Theo sent Cal a song at midnight and a photograph at 1. Cal slept with his phone face down, and that is how you mark the beginning of a different story. I didn't worry then because we were still good at being ordinary. We had an index card taped to the fridge with rules we never admitted how badly we needed. We said no afters without names and minutes. We said compliments open no doors. We said hands belong to what they're holding. We said these things in the kitchen where the radiator hissed like a rumor and felt protected by our own mouthwork. There's a difference between cheating and rehearsal. Cal rehearsed with Theo for hours. Once on a Thursday when the city decided to rain in earnest, he didn't come home until an hour after the hour he had said. I asked the kind question, "Are you in trouble?" He said, "I am trouble," and kissed me in a way that made the neighbors bless us with broom handles. He pressed me against the door like he wanted the lock to learn to trust him. I put my mouth on his throat, and he made the sound a person makes when they forget they're on stage. We forgave each other for no crime and slept like we had applied for a truce. The balcony at Theo's loft was where we should have known better. It watched an alley that liked secrets. We were there together after a rehearsal we had all lied about. Cal said he needed me to hear him with Theo's timing. I leaned on the railing and watched the rain pretend to audition as emotion. Theo stood too close and pretended it was because of the wind. Cal touched my wrist like an errand. Theo looked at Cal's mouth the way a director looks at a scene he doesn't want to cut. I said I needed water. Cal said he needed lines. Theo said this is what it looks like when text pays attention. No one said the thing you'd think you'd say. We kissed that night like we were trying to talk each other out of ambition. We were not careful. In the morning, Cal made coffee in the way he does when he wants to be forgiven for something he hasn't done yet. He put his hands on my hips and asked if I knew how beautiful I looked when I wasn't performing. I said that sounded like an excuse trying to grow up. We still laughed. I found the first undeniable proof in the laundry, a cuff smeared with lipstick the color of a breath. We did not know anyone who wore that mouth. Cal said it was a prop. I asked if he wanted to try again. He said he didn't kiss Theo. He said he wanted to want that. He said it like he was practicing a speech where I was the good guy and he was the person everybody forgave because he meant well and because he was pretty. I did not throw anything. I kept the index card taped to the fridge like a religion and watched the basil fall in love with gravity. Theo invited us to dinner in the kind of restaurant that confuses darkness with taste. He sat with his elbow on the table like he owned the surface. Cal ordered something with butter and shame. The waiter flirted with all three of us because some people like to be ethical in a way that doesn't count. Theo told stories about other men he had directed into better lives. He touched Cal's shoulder the way you touch a page you plan to steal. I went to the bathroom and looked in the mirror at a man who had become responsible for the plot. When I came back, Theo raised his glass and said, "To brave choices," and Cal drank like he'd already made one. We didn't break up that night. We did something worse. We let the story keep writing. Cal and Theo met for notes during hours that learned to be plural. I pretended to be busy with a casting session full of men who looked like the kind of bad decision I could afford. One of them smiled at me and said he liked my voice. It sounded like permission. I thought about kissing him. I didn't. I was saving my mistakes for somebody who mattered. When it finally happened, I wasn't there. That is how betrayal insists on being pious. Cal told me a week later in the kitchen with the radiator hissing like an old audience. He said it quietly in the way people tell secrets when they want to still be invited to the party. He said it wasn't sex, it was certainty. He said he had never felt so safe and so seen, which are two words that should never be allowed to share a sentence in a story like this. I thanked him for telling me and hated myself for rehearsing. The sex that followed was the kind that wakes the apartment building. It had more apology than grace and more habit than art. I bit his shoulder like punctuation. He asked me if I wanted him to stop, and I said not yet, which may be the most honest sentence we ever shared. When we were done, he cried into the pillow the way beautiful men do when they want to be holy. I held him the way people hold each other when they know the room is judging. I met Theo alone because I was tired of being the only one who didn't audition. We sat on that same balcony and drank the same wine we had not needed. He said he loved Cal, and I said so did I like a dare. He said he would never ask Cal to leave me, and I said that was the kind of ethics polite people invent to stay pretty. He said I didn't know what it was like to love someone whose body was rented out to fiction. I said I was in casting, and that I had learned to tell the difference between a role and a person by whether they put their phone face down when they sleep. It is not an affair unless somebody wants to be punished. I wanted Theo to kiss me so I could hate him properly. He did not. He touched my wrist the way Cal had and said, "You're kinder than you pretend," which is the kind of compliment that thinks it won't get fined. I left before we could make bad seem like a duet. We called it open as if putting a modern word on it could keep us safe. Open meant we would ask permission to be interesting and then put away the curiosity before morning. Open meant telling each other more than you want to know. Open meant living inside a dare and pretending it was a religion. We were not good at it. We were practicing not breaking up. The thing about sex after confession is how it gets better. He was greedy with his mouth in a way he hadn't been since the first summer. He learned new patience. I learned what part of my back made him forget his intentions. We didn't talk about Theo in bed. We talked about geography. We learned where no meant wait and where wait meant ask again sweetly. We closed the curtains because daylight has an ego. We ended because Theo did something stupid. He told Cal he wanted a future in words that sounded like stage directions. He wanted an apartment with plants you apologize to. He wanted a bed that learned them. He wanted, you understand, ownership. Cal came home with his mouth rehearsing no. I watched him practice on the sink. He said, "I choose you," and I did the thing you are not supposed to do. I believed him because he was scared and because I was tired. Theo wrote a final message that said take care of him as if I'd ever stopped. I wrote back nothing because that is how a person forgives themselves. Cal and I went to a matinee of a film that did not know the word intrigue. We sat in the dark and held hands like teenagers because sometimes people get to be small. We walked home the long way and bought an orange and a newspaper and pretended we could be those people who read together without wanting to turn a page into a weapon. We didn't change the locks because we learned to live with our own doors. We took down the index card and rewrote it as a sentence. Don't make us interesting to other rooms. It worked until it didn't, and then it worked again. He started drawing sets for plays that refused to be pretty. I started casting actors who didn't apologize when they told the truth. We kept sleeping in the bed that knew everything and decided to trust it. Sometimes late, he asks if I want him to close the curtains. I say yes or no depending on what kind of sky the city is making for us. Sometimes he says, "Tell me you love me," like a new line, and I do. Sometimes I think about Theo's balcony and the way the railing felt under my fingers the night I didn't kiss him, and that is a kind of sex I can live with, memory choosing to be minor. If you want to know whether we were good or bad people, try asking a couch. It will tell you where the bodies were and how long they stayed. The couch in our living room has learned boredom again. The bowl by the door keeps keys and doesn't ask for alibis. The basil came back to life when the weather remembered what month it was. Love, I think, is a room you clean even when no one is coming over. Intrigue is a doorbell that you stop answering. And sex, when you're lucky, is the story you tell in the dark to the person who keeps showing up for the ending.